the kind of question of socialism can't be reduced any longer to the laborers appropriating the property of the capitalists and associated labor kind of becoming dominant in the organization of a firm. It can't be that anymore because capital is so systemic that really the path to socialism can only be defined by what might be called a kind of redesign of the whole system rather than simply laborers taking over the means of production and becoming the managers. That's not adequate anymore. So what I wanted to say was when we start to think about this system redesign, we're confronting something which is very, very, very large. In the Grundrisse, what Marx kind of says is, look, we've been considering matters from the standpoint of the individual capitalist right to this moment. So when we're talking about productive labor and productive activity, we're talking about an individual capitalist firm or even an individual capitalist person. But at a certain point, all of this gets socialized, and we start to find ourselves behaving in such a way which is not how we would behave if we were left to ourselves, but is a way that we are forced to behave by what Marx calls the coercive laws of competition. The coercive laws of competition force capital, for example, to certain kinds of technological change. These technological changes are such as to give certain advantage to individual capitalists who adopt them first. So we get something Marx called relative surplus value through technological advantage. But the problem is that the technological advantage comes by removing labor from production. Now, if labor is a source of all value, that means there's less value to go around. Therefore, technological change and the relative surplus value is at the source of the falling rate of profit. And therefore, there is less profit to go around socially. So that, in a sense, individual capitalists operating in their own self-interest produce a systemic result which is antagonistic to the well-being and the capacities of the capitalist class as a whole. So no capitalist would actually engage in technological innovation if they knowingly thought that that technological innovation was going to lower their rate of profit. I mean, it would be an insane thing to do. But they do it because they don't know that it's going to lower the rate of profit, and it's the coercive laws of competition that force them to do it. So what Marx then says is, by the time we've got through all of this, what we're looking at now is a system, and the whole system is integrated, and the integrations within the system are such that we find ourselves responding to abstractions. And he has a very interesting kind of moment that when he kind of says, and it's these abstractions and the contradictions implicit in these abstractions which start to actually dominate how a capitalist system works, independent of what the opinions and ideas of the individual capitalists are, and therefore independent of whoever is in charge of the firm. So what happens then is that if the laborers take over the ownership and management of the firm and set up a cooperative enterprise and say, well, okay, the social relations are very different and all this kind of thing, if those social relations are embedded systemically in a system that's organized through the coercive laws of competition, then in a way it doesn't matter whether it is the capitalists who own the firm or whether it's the laborers and the associated laborers, because they're both going to operate in exactly the same way because the coercive laws of competition are going to force them to do this. Now, this is a sort of problem that is confronted in Argentina, where there's been a lot of takeovers of firms and cooperatives set up, and all of them, to some degree, do a good job or try to do a good job of improving the social relations within the company, within the firm. But the firm is in competition with other firms, and through competition finds itself forced to certain labor practices and certain forms of efficiency and so on, so that the large number of recuperated enterprises that exist in Argentina, in a way, end up being enterprises which are self-managed, but they're still capitalistic because they're embedded within the system. So this is the point at which you would say, look, it's the whole system that has to be addressed, not the individual enterprise, and that therefore the notion of socialism, which we have to pursue, is about the redesign of the whole system